Some JRPGs launch, everyone goes crazy, instant classics. These 11, they flop hard. Then became legends anyway. We're talking games that almost killed entire franchises. Titles literally too good for their own time. And look, if you haven't played some of these, you're missing out on legitimately some of the best JRPGs ever made. Let's go.
Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii pisses me off to this day because Nintendo of America straight up said, nah, Americans don't want this. Like, what? You've got this massive, sprawling JRPG with some of the best world design in gaming history. You're literally running around on the corpses of two giant gods, and NOA's looking at their Wii install base of millions and going, too niche. The combat's this real-time system where positioning actually matters. The story goes places. Monolith Soft poured everything into it, but NOA just didn't want to localize it. Europe got it in 2010, Japan got it in 2010, North America, radio silence. That's when fans lost it. June 2011, Operation Rainfall kicks off. Thousands of people writing letters, signing petitions, making noise online. They targeted 3 games: Xenoblade, The Last Story, and Pandora's Tower. And here's the crazy part, it worked! December 2011, Nintendo caved and announced a North American release. April 2012, the game finally hits. And you know what? It sold way better than expected. So much better that Xenoblade Chronicles 2 became a legit system seller for the Switch. The franchise is huge now, all because fans refuse to take no for an answer. This was a wake-up call for Nintendo's localization strategy. They don't pull this shit anymore. Fans literally changed how the company operates.
Fire Emblem Awakening is the most high-stakes JRPG development story I've ever heard. This game had to sell 250,000 copies, or the entire 22-year-old franchise was getting canceled. Done. No more Fire Emblem. Ever. Producer Hitoshi Yamagami remembers the meeting where they got that ultimatum. He went back to the team and said, "The end has come." But instead of just making a safe, by-the-numbers Fire Emblem to hit that quota, Intelligent Systems did something insane. They threw in everything. Every feature they'd been too scared to try, every idea they'd been shelving for years. If this was going to be the last Fire Emblem, they'd make it count. Marriage system, generational mechanics where your character's kids join the fight, way more accessible difficulty options. The pair-up mechanic that completely changed how positioning works in combat. They went all in. First week in Japan, 242,000 units sold. Worldwide, 2.33 million copies. It became the fastest-selling Fire Emblem game in history. Nintendo's sales team immediately started demanding a sequel. And now Fire Emblem is one of Nintendo's flagship franchises. Three Houses sold over 4 million copies, and Gage came out strong. This series was literally one bad release away from extinction, and Awakening saved it by refusing to play it safe. The controversial part though, some hardcore fans think Awakening dumbed down the series. I get it, but I'm also team, I'd rather have a slightly more accessible Fire Emblem than no Fire Emblem at all.
Okami is a tragedy, like actually heartbreaking. This game released on PS2 in 2006 with universal critical acclaim. Game of the Year nominations, perfect scores, everyone praising it. The watercolor art style, gorgeous. The celestial brush mechanics, innovative as hell. Drawing your attacks and environmental solutions with this ancient Japanese mythology vibe, chef's kiss. And it sold like absolute shit. Initial shipment was 90,000 units. First year, maybe 150,000 copies. Director Hideki Kamiya himself called it a huge failure. Here's where it gets worse. This commercial disaster directly killed Clover Studio. Capcom shut them down entirely. Okami flopped, God Hand flopped, and that was it. Studio absorbed, done. But then, something weird happened. Despite bombing at retail, Okami developed this intensely devoted cult following. People kept talking about it, kept recommending it. This game refused to die. So Capcom started re-releasing it. PS3, PS4, Switch, Xbox One, PC, every platform imaginable. And over time, it accumulated over 4.1 million sales across all those releases. It holds a Guinness World Record for the poorest commercial performance by a Game of the Year winner.
And it's also considered one of the most beautiful, artistically ambitious JRPGs ever made. The game that killed its own studio became a timeless classic. That's the kind of comeback I'm talking about.
Lost Odyssey had everything going for it. Hironobu Sakaguchi directing, Nobuo Uematsu doing the music, Taheki Inoue on character design, Microsoft throwing money at it as their flagship JRPG for Xbox 360. This was supposed to be huge. The game itself, legitimately great. Those 1,000 years of dream sequences, these long, poetic memories of the protagonist's 1,000-year life, they hit hard, like moved players to tears hard. The combat was solid. The production values were there. Critics loved it. But here's the problem. It was on the Xbox 360 in 2008, the console with basically zero presence in Japan and that struggled with Japanese game fans worldwide. Lost Odyssey sold around 900,000 copies total across all markets. Microsoft expected way more, and it got worse. The game released alongside juggernauts like Gears of War and Halo. JRPG fans, who mostly owned PlayStations, never even saw the marketing. It just disappeared. Wrong console, wrong timing, wrong audience. Everything about the release was cursed. But years later, something changed. Freed from commercial pressure, the gaming community started re-evaluating it. The emotional storytelling, the technical achievement, the artistic ambition, people realized this was one of the best JRPGs of the 7th gen console era. It became a beloved hidden gem. When Xbox added it to backwards compatibility, a whole new generation discovered Sakaguchi's forgotten masterpiece. Sometimes a game just needs time and the right platform to find its audience.
Nier's comeback is completely tied to Yoko Taro. And you need to understand this man is weird. He wears a giant, creepy mask to hide his face. He makes games that actively subvert player expectations and genre conventions. Publishers don't know what to do with him. The original Nier hit in 2010 and sold maybe 500,000 copies worldwide. Commercial failure. Done. Taro himself later admitted, Automata's selling was a fluke, and all my other stuff has hardly sold anything worthy of note. Like, the man has no illusions about his commercial track record. But despite poor sales, Nier developed this passionate cult following. Players who loved the bizarre post-apocalyptic premise, the philosophical depth, the way it challenged assumptions about what a game should be. Taro's design philosophy, games as art over commercial accessibility, resonated with people tired of conventional narratives. So Square Enix did something insane. They greenlit a sequel to a commercial bomb by a developer known for making uncommercial games. This defied every business logic. Nier Automata dropped in 2017 and sold over 5.5 million copies. Universal acclaim, one of the best-selling games of the decade. Yoko Taro became a household name. And here's the thing, nothing about Taro's approach changed between the original Nier and Automata. He made the exact same kind of weird, philosophical, genre-bending game. The audience just finally caught up to his vision. Sometimes you don't need to compromise, you just need the right moment.
Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne hit PS2 in 2003, and Atlus made a decision that was either brave or insane. They refused to compromise for Western audiences at all. The game is dark, philosophically complex, brutally difficult, unapologetically Japanese. It's about rebuilding civilization after the apocalypse, and you're grappling with competing philosophical frameworks, chaos, law, neutrality, that force you into genuine ethical dilemmas about societal organization. When it released in the West in 2004, it flopped hard. And that Matador boss, the one that became legendary in gaming communities, that's where casual players quit. That skill check destroyed people who weren't prepared. But within JRPG circles, Nocturne developed this fearsome reputation as a masterpiece. Players who persisted through the difficulty discovered one of the most intellectually satisfying games ever made. The narrative doesn't hold your hand, the combat doesn't forgive mistakes, and that uncompromising vision appealed to hardcore fans who were tired of games being designed for the widest possible audience. What began as a commercial disappointment became increasingly influential. The game shaped contemporary JRPG design. When Atlus released the HD remaster in 2021 for modern consoles, it introduced Nocturne to new audiences who embraced its vision. Some games aren't meant for everyone. Nocturne knew exactly what it was and refused to apologize for it. That's why it became a cult classic.
The last story is complicated. Hironobu Sakaguchi directing, Nobuo Uematsu on music. It's an action-oriented JRPG trying to revolutionize the genre with real-time tactical combat. Everything about the pedigree screams, this should be huge. And it just never got there. Released on Wii in Japan in 2011, it eventually got a limited Western localization through Operation Rainfall's efforts, but the game had problems. Technical performance issues, camera jank, frame rate drops, battle system inconsistencies. Critics noted the story was compelling, but the execution fell short. Commercially, it suffered from the Wii's declining appeal and basically zero marketing outside dedicated JRPG communities. It sold poorly in the West. The franchise momentum Mistwalker hoped for never happened. But look, in retrospect, the last story has developed this cult following among people who appreciate its narrative risks and creative ambitions. Emulation communities kept it alive, fans reevaluated its contributions to the genre. It never achieved mainstream success. It probably never will, but it represents something important, a game that tried to push the genre forward even when commercial realities prevented its full realization. Sometimes the attempt matters as much as the execution. The last story is an important footnote in JRPG history, even if it's not a success story.
Number 8. Suikoden 2, released on PlayStation in 1998, during the era of Final Fantasy VII's cultural dominance, and it just got buried. Initial sales hit around 380,000 copies, which sounds okay until you remember FF7 sold millions. The game had a limited production run, poor Western marketing, and for years, physical copies were expensive and rare. But here's what's wild. Over decades, Suikoden 2 started accumulating historical reevaluations. Gaming journalists, retrospective video essayists, Reddit communities, everyone started recognizing it as one of the finest JRPGs ever created. 108 recruitable characters, multiple endings based on player choices, deep political intrigue about war, betrayal, and friendship. The scope of this game anticipated modern design by over 2 decades. When Konami released the Suikoden 1 and 2 HD remaster in March 2025, sales were described as extremely strong. Industry observers were shocked. The remaster sparked renewed interest, and suddenly people were talking about anime adaptations and spiritual successors. And look, I get why it took so long. Suikoden 2 is dense, it's slow-burn storytelling, it requires investment. But players who stuck with it discovered this emotionally devastating narrative about war's cost and the bonds that survive it. Today, it's universally recognized as a cult classic that outlasted mainstream contemporaries in respect and longevity. Commercial failure in one era transformed into historical significance decades later. That's the power of quality. Sometimes it just takes time.
Dragon Quest's Western story is legitimately insane. The game hit Famicom in Japan in 1986. It arrived in North America as Dragon Warrior in August 1989, 3 years later. And by 1989, its graphics looked ancient and its gameplay seemed primitive compared to what was coming out. Nintendo's own people knew it was a problem. Former Nintendo Fun Club president Howard Phillips straight up said, Dragon Quest/Dragon Warrior was subpar because it was pushed into the Western market several years too late. Sales were abysmal. Nintendo manufactured 1 million copies expecting demand. Demand never came. So Nintendo did something brilliant. They bundled free copies with Nintendo Power Magazine subscriptions. This strategy worked. Over 1 million copies distributed. The game finally reached audiences who discovered that beneath the dated graphics was this charming, engaging RPG. And you know what? New subscriptions surged. Dragon Warrior transformed from retail failure to a foundational title in North American JRPG history. The franchise eventually achieved massive success in the West, rivaling Final Fantasy's cultural prominence. Today, Dragon Quest is one of the best-selling RPG franchises globally, all because Nintendo refused to accept the failure and innovated with creative marketing. Imagine if they just given up. We might not have Dragon Quest in the West at all. Persistence and creativity can resurrect seemingly doomed localizations.
Earthbound launched on Super Nintendo in 1995 and sold roughly 140,000 copies in its first week despite critical acclaim.
For context, that's terrible. The aesthetic, inspired by Peanuts comic strips, clashed with SNES gamers' expectations shaped by games like Donkey Kong Country's photorealistic graphics. The contemporary American suburban setting lacked the exotic appeal of Final Fantasy's fantastical worlds. And Nintendo's marketing, the infamous "This game stinks" campaign with scratch and sniff cards emphasizing disgusting imagery, it alienated everyone. Earthbound faded into obscurity. Physical copies became collector's items worth hundreds of dollars. But then, two things happened. First, internet emulation communities preserved and distributed it, letting new generations experience it freely. Second, Nintendo's Virtual Console released classic games digitally, making Earthbound accessible at affordable prices. And it became one of the best-selling Virtual Console games. Millions of players had been waiting for affordable access. Today, Earthbound is universally recognized as an SNES classic and one of gaming's most innovative JRPGs. Its quirky humor, contemporary setting, emotional depth, everything that made it weird in 1995 is exactly why it's beloved now. The downside, it took emulation and digital distribution to save it. Without those technological shifts, Earthbound might have stayed forgotten. Fan preservation and technology can elevate commercial failures into cultural relevance. Sometimes that's what it takes.
Valkyria Chronicles hit PS3 in 2008 with this gorgeous anime-inspired aesthetic that mimicked pencil drawings in motion. The Blitz combat system blended turn-based strategy with real-time action. Critics loved it, strong performance in Japan. But in Western markets, it underperformed. The PS3's slow adoption in Japan and limited Western marketing meant it never hit expected sales. Sequels saw diminishing returns. Valkyria Chronicles 3 never even got a Western release. The series looked dead. Here's the problem. It occupied this awkward niche. Too strategic for action game fans, too action-oriented for traditional strategy enthusiasts. Nobody knew how to market it, but the series has quietly experienced a renaissance. Ports, remasters, renewed fan advocacy. Valkyria Chronicles 4's 2018 Western release showed publishers had confidence in international appeal. The dedicated cult following expanded through emulation and modern ports. Look, Valkyria Chronicles never achieved Fire Emblem-level mainstream success, but its comeback represents how niche titles can develop devoted followings that sustain franchise longevity despite market headwinds. Innovation and authenticity eventually find their audience. It just might take years. The series proves that refusing to be another cookie-cutter strategy game was the right call, even if commercial success arrived late.
So, what do all these games have in common? They refused to compromise. They had artistic vision, and they had communities that recognized their value long before mainstream acceptance arrived. Some got saved by fan campaigns, some by creative marketing, some by technological change. But every single one represents a game that was supposedly doomed and said, "Not today." And honestly, that's what makes these stories so damn compelling. These aren't just games that got lucky, they're games that earned their second chance through quality, persistence, and fans who refuse to let them die. If you haven't played some of these, fix that. These are the JRPGs that refuse to be forgotten. And there's a reason why.